Interviewing, Creating a Story Bank, brought to you by Mohr Career Services at the Lundquist College of Business. In an interview, it is very important that you communicate your alignment. That means that for each job, you're going to be looking at the company, what are their values, their mission, their culture, and what are the specifics of the job. And then you will look at yourself, your values, interests, personality, strengths, also your experience and skills, and see how those overlap. Where they overlap, that's called alignment. So it's important to be able to speak to the things that the company will care about. So you'll begin by looking at the job announcement. What skills are they looking for? Here are some examples: communication, teamwork, problem solving, and leadership. Now, obviously, for each job, they could be looking for something slightly different. I am using these as examples because these are some foundational business skills that many firms are looking for. We recommend to prepare for your interview that you prepare who stories about your skills. Your stories will give you examples to share to answer those behavioral questions, the ones that begin, "Can you tell me about a time when," or "Give me an example of a time that." These examples can often be used to answer different questions. So create a story bank of example stories that prove important skills. And this is an example of how you might lay that out. What is a who story? A who story follows a certain framework where you want to make sure you include what you did, the task, how you did it, the skills or the method you used to complete that, and the outcomes of your work. What results did you help to achieve? What was the contribution you made to the team? Or what was the intention behind the work? So let's look at some examples. So if I am sketching out a story bank, I'm not going to worry about creating a whole speech that I'm going to memorize. In fact, I don't want to do that, because then in an interview, I'm spending all of my time and energy trying to recall the exact speech that I wrote down instead of having a conversation in the interview, which is much more effective. So instead, for my story bank, I'm going to write down some notes, whatever it is that's going to help me to remember the story. So I've come up with a couple of examples here. So for communication, I'm going to try to prove my communication skills through an example that I'm sharing. Now, as a student, you often won't have a specific example from a job that's just like the job you're applying for. That is okay. What you're going to do is draw on the experience that you already have and look for examples in that experience that will help prove the skill. Remember, skills are what is transferable, job to job, industry to industry. All right, example number 1. So for communication, perhaps a student has served as an RA. So the what would be, as an RA, mediated resident disputes. One example, and here I am drawing on a specific example because that is what helps the story to be memorable. One example involved residents in conflict over playing loud music during evenings. That's the what. Then the how, approached situation with curiosity, used active listening, asked both residents for input and possible solutions. What was the outcome? Residents agreed on a schedule and sometimes planned to use earbuds. Both felt like they were part of the solution. All right, let's take a look at leadership. Again, I am not pulling from an example that has to do with a job that a student is applying for, rather a job that they've already had and the skills that they've used there. Let's take a look at a leadership example. The what? During summer restaurant job, trained 3 new hires on menu and procedures. How? Used knowledge of products and created common customer scenarios for training. The outcome? Received positive feedback from manager, and new employees said they felt well prepared after going through the scenarios. So you'll see that these example stories help to prove the skill. Now you'll want to be able to adapt your stories because you cannot possibly prepare for every single question that someone might ask you. So your story bank should provide enough examples to help you answer behavioral interview questions. Again, the tell me about a time when questions. The goal is to create 7 to 10 stories. You can create more than one story for the skills you think are the most important. Note that most stories can be used to answer different questions, just not in the same interview. So for instance, if we were looking at that RA example for communication, yes, that could be used to answer a question about communication. It also could be used to answer a question about leadership or a question about conflict management. So you can see that you can adapt the stories to fit the different questions. Again, you don't want to repeat the same story in the same interview. For further support, join us for Drop-In Advising in Lillis 155 from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, weeks 1 through 10, fall, winter, and spring terms. Make an appointment with a career advisor through Handshake. For more resources, including video content, check out our website, mohr.uoregon.edu.